What's the difference between vegetarian, vegan, and whole food plant-based? Stick around. We're getting into it right now. Hey everyone, welcome back. My name is Manya and I've lost over 30 pounds on the WW Purple Plan, eating mostly a whole food plant-based diet. Now it's that phrase, whole food plant-based, that I'm going to talk about today because that has caused some confusion for some of you, especially since I've gone through that transition with this channel. When I first started this channel, if you have watched my very popular 5 tips for WW Purple, if you haven't, I will link that below in the description box. But if you've watched that, you know that for that video, I was vegetarian. I was still eating dairy, and I'm not anymore. And so what are the difference between those things? If you've always wondered, but haven't wanted to ask, I'm gonna break them down for you. Let's start with vegetarian. This is, I think, the easiest one to understand at its core, but there have been some offshoots in the last couple of years that I want to help you understand. So I have been what is called an ovo-lacto vegetarian for over 20 years. I became ovo-lacto vegetarian when I was 18 and was a vegetarian up until about 6 to 8 months ago. So an ovo-lacto vegetarian is someone who eats no meat, no fish, but eats dairy. So no meat, pork, chicken, beef, no fish, but I did eat dairy. So in theory, I could have had milk. I don't. I never did. I've never been a milk drinker, but sometimes like with baking or something like that, milk, cream, butter was fine, eggs were fine, cheese was fine. That's the way that I ate for over 20 years. Now, since I became a vegetarian in 1993, back then it was pretty clear. Ovo-lacto vegetarian, that was it. Since then, other offshoots of vegetarianism have emerged, such as pescatarian. So that is someone who eats no, what they would call meat. So no chicken, beef, turkey, pork, but they do eat seafood. So they'll eat fish, crustaceans, that sort of thing. And of course they also eat dairy for the most part. So that's a pescatarian. There's something called a flexitarian, which is someone who I believe for the most part eats vegetarian, but then occasionally will eat meat, maybe out in restaurants or if it's offered. But the reason I became a vegetarian back in 1993 was because I read a book called Diet for a New America by a man named John Robbins. John Robbins was the heir to the Baskin and Robbins empire, and he gave it up because he discovered how animals were treated in the meat processing industry. And Diet for a New America is a lot about what it's like in slaughterhouses. And so I became a vegetarian for animal welfare reasons. I managed to ignore for 20 years how animals are treated to produce things like milk, cheese, and eggs, but we're not all perfect. So that's vegetarian and some of its offshoots. Now let's talk about vegan. So vegan, in my opinion, and from here on out, I would say this is my opinion, but based on research and just sort of being aware of the world and the community. Vegan, in my opinion, is a way of life. In addition to how you eat and what you eat or don't eat, so breaking that down, vegan is like vegetarian on steroids, right? So vegans eat no animal products, no beef, chicken, turkey, pork, no fish. But on top of that, they eat nothing that has been produced either by an animal or inside of an animal. So no dairy, no eggs, no honey, nothing that sort of is connected to an animal in any way. The reason I call it a lifestyle choice is because in my experience, vegans also try to eliminate animal products outside of food. So no more leather, for example, leather shoes, leather belts, leather bags, no more leather. Nothing that really was produced by harming or killing an animal. There are some exceptions to how you can get something from an animal where the animal didn't suffer. There are ways, for example, the wool question, right? So how do you feel about wool? No sheep was killed, but how were they treated when the wool was extracted? It gets very, very deep and difficult, and it really becomes a lifestyle choice. In addition, there are other ways that vegans and people who are committed to animal welfare try to help animals. So for example, not buying cosmetics that are tested on animals, which is so much easier now than it used to be. I've been doing that for a long time, and it's pretty wonderful how this movement has really overtaken the industry. It's not perfect, but we've made leaps and bounds from where we used to be. The one thing I will say about veganism, and that'll lead us into talking about whole food plant-based, is many people think that vegan equals healthy. Let me tell you, it is very easy to be an unhealthy, overweight vegan, especially where we are now. So all of this progress that I was talking about, how it's so much easier to find vegan food, well, that's wonderful. It also means that a lot of that food is heavily processed, has a lot of oil, has a lot of sugar, salt, and saturated fats. Those are not good for you. So just because something says it's vegan does not mean it's healthy. Take, for example, the Impossible Burger. And I'll put some information on the screen about the nutritional facts around the Impossible Burger. What is generally being said in the whole food plant-based community about products like this is it's a question of better than. So if you want to take a beef burger, which is really not good for you, it's okay to have occasionally, but it's not a health food. The Impossible Burger is better than a beef burger, but it's definitely not better than my homemade black bean burgers, which have no oil, no fat, and are made from beans and oats and spices. So it's a matter of health scale, and these are the things that you need to decide for yourself. But having been in the community for a long time, I know that there are some very unhealthy vegans, especially recently. It's so easy to buy vegan food that is unhealthy. So let's talk about whole food plant-based. Whole food plant-based is definitely vegan eating. It is not necessarily embracing the whole lifestyle that I talked about with leather and that sort of thing. Whole food plant-based is a health-based choice. And there are many people who have chosen to be whole food plant-based and do not consider themselves vegan and are not doing it for animal welfare reasons. Some of us are, because for me this was sort of a natural progression from being vegetarian, the reasons I became vegetarian, but it's not necessarily the same thing. And it is a health choice. So whole food plant-based is exactly what it sounds like. It is a diet of mostly plants, whole unprocessed starches and carbohydrates, beans, legumes, lentils, nuts, seeds, healthy fats in the form of avocado, tahini, that kind of thing. So it is food that is minimally processed, ideally not processed at all, food in its whole form that you then cook from scratch. That is what whole food plant-based is. From there can be offshoots. So there can be whole food plant-based, no oil, which is sort of what I am. I avoid oils as much as possible. And then there's people who are whole food plant-based, no sugar, no salt, no oil. So it can get kind of extreme. But to me, that's the biggest difference. So you have vegetarian, where it's really just not eating flesh, if you will. Well, sorry, that grossed me out a little bit to say that word. But that's really what vegetarian is. And you can still enjoy your cheeses, your eggs, your dairy, that kind of thing. And then vegan is this lifestyle choice, which encompasses the way that you live and the way that you interact with animals on this planet. And then there's whole food plant-based, which is a health food choice. And oftentimes there are meat eaters who are whole food plant-based. I do not consider myself a meat eater, but someone can consider themselves a meat eater, but they are giving up meat to be more healthy. So I hope that clears it up for you. Let me know in the comments below if that's what you were looking for. If you have any other questions, drop them in the comments. I'd be happy to answer them in a future video. As always, thank you for being here, and I will see you next time. Bye.